Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the live studios. And here we are, where it all started. In Wisteria Cottage, in Hode Farm, just outside of Folkestone, in between Folkestone and Canterbury, in Kent, UK. So, we've had a very nice journey with Bhakta Matt. Bell Roberts is traveling with me, and he's full on hearing and chanting and serving and learning the ropes, and we're going to be going to Govardhan together, and he's going to be able to associate with the great Mahants there, and we're very happy for him and thank him for making this decision to come with us. We met a lot of nice people on the way, and everyone was chanting Hare Krishna. We were being with people in such a way that you could see that they were enlivened, because these are people who serve other people, and most people don't care. They don't care to say a nice word or come. What's the word? When you commend someone, a favorable word, a flattering word. People just don't do that anymore. And when you do, and then you lace it with Krishna consciousness and get them to chant Hare Krishna, etc., it changes the atmosphere. So we had a very nice trip to the UK in that way. So here we are, Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8. We'll start today with Chapter 22, but before we do, we're going to do our regular program. Reliability over time breeds faith. And this is how I got a very nice message from Rati Manjari, one of our loyal listeners and the best hearers. And she said, Maharaj, because you're there night after night after night after night, no matter what, it is becoming real to me. The Srimad Bhagavatam is becoming real to me. So that touched me very deeply, and I think it's a lesson that we all can learn, to be regular at what we do, no matter what it is that we do. Okay, Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami, and it goes like this: Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidwanduditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshakshadayate, Sarvada Sivasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Mad Mahadana Mannistadaga Madbhagya Madananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadutadayin adini chochita kada hanamun jagadachin mam premna retkanta yospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, no excuses. Even if you're the most fallen, you will be exalted by hearing the Bhagavatam. Please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And as long as I'm in the process of plugging the service of other people, I want to remind everybody that Radharaman Prabhu is here, and he has organized and arranged the internet connection this time with no hitches, and it's working perfectly, and we all owe him a great debt. Thank you so much, Radharaman Prabhu. We've known each other since 1990. Yeah, he came a devotee. He went to this question and answer sessions that we were conducting every day there for almost 7 years. Then he became a stalwart leader and Sankirtan leader and inspirer, and now he's counseling devotees, and he's just a very, very dear friend, and we owe him a lot. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Okay, we're in the chapter that's called the questions of Maharaj Pariksit. Now this is interesting because he's asking questions all along, since the beginning practically. But this is a series of questions that are special, because the answers to this question form the basis of the answers to the whole rest of the book, right? So it's incredible. 2 points come out. I mean, we've read a lot of the questions so far. We're in the middle of them. But the depth of the questions shows that this person who's asking the questions already knows everything. Because he's asking about everything, things that people don't usually know about. So this shows that even if you're an advanced person, you should ask questions. And if you're an advanced person, your questions will be even more efficient and more meaningful for everyone else. And that's the way it works. Even when you're in an assembly and you're giving lectures or whatever, it's always a few people who ask the questions, always. And everyone else gets the benefit. So in this case, it's Maharaj Pariksit, the perfect questions, Shukadeva Goswami, the perfect answers to the Bhagavatam. And we're on text 22. Please also explain how, merged in the body of the Lord, living entities are created, and how the infidels appear in the world. Also, please explain how the unconditioned living entities exist. Purport. The progressive devotee of the Lord, there's another one of those, Where is it? Just go over and get it, and you can use it. The progressive devotee of the Lord must inquire from the bona fide spiritual master how living entities merged in the body of the Lord again come back at the time of creation. 0640. There are two kinds of living entities. There are ever liberated, unconditioned living beings, as well as the ever conditioned living beings. Of the ever conditioned living beings, there are two divisions. They are the faithful and the infidels. Of the faithful, there are again two divisions, namely the devotees and the mental speculators. The mental speculators desire to merge into the existence of the Lord, or to become one with the Lord, whereas the devotees of the Lord desire to keep separated identities and constantly engage in the service of the Lord. The devotees who are not fully purified, as well as the empiric philosophers, become conditioned again during the next creation for further purification. Such conditioned souls become liberated by further progress of devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj Pariksit asked all these questions from the bona fide spiritual master in order to become fully equipped in the science of God. Text 23. The independent personality of Godhead enjoys his pastimes by his internal potency, and at the time of annihilation gives them up to the external potency, and he remains a witness to it all. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead and fountainhead of all other incarnations, is the only independent person. He enjoys his pastimes by creation as he desires and gives them up to the external energy at the time of annihilation. By his internal potency only, he kills the demon Putana, even though enjoying his pastimes in the lap of his mother, Yashoda. And when he desires to leave this world, he creates the pastimes of killing his own family members, Yadukula, and remains unaffected by such annihilation. He is the witness of everything that is happening, and yet he has nothing to do with anything. He is independent in every respect. Maharaj Pariksit desired to know perfectly, more perfectly. For a pure devotee, ought to know well. I'm going to repeat this sentence. It's very important. Maharaj Pariksit desired to know more perfectly. For a pure devotee, ought to know well. So this is like the theme song of this daily reading we've been doing now for quite some time. It seems like should be, we should desire to know perfectly. For a pure devotee, ought to know well. And you know well by hearing again and again. And Prabhupada's purports, they repeat, sometimes it appears like they're repeating the same thing, and he does, but it's in a little different way, in a little different circumstance, different devotees. And the reason for the repetition, as Prabhupada said many times in his lectures, is to get a thorough understanding. And in the purport to the famous verse, Tadvidi Panipatina, Pariprashnena Sevya, where Krishna tells Arjuna that you have to inquire submissively from the spiritual master. There's so many controversies going on now. And it seems to me, after doing this reading every night like this for such a long time, submissively, that the devotees who get into different controversies, they tend not to be reading submissively, and therefore not really reading the books, and therefore they're not getting the benefit, and they don't know well. And here it says, they ought to know well. To know well, you have to hear again and again. Even Lord Brahma heard 3 times through all of Vedic literature, studied them carefully before. And then he said, at the end, still I can't understand you, to Krishna. So this is very important for our project, our mission, for hearing the Bhagavatam every day like this. Text 24. O great sage, representative of the Lord, kindly satisfy my inquisitiveness in all that I have inquired from you, and all that I may not have inquired from you, from the very beginning of my questionings. Since I am a soul surrendered unto you, please impart full knowledge in this connection. Purport. The spiritual master is always prepared to impart knowledge to the disciple, and specifically when the disciple is very inquisitive. Inquisitiveness on the part of a disciple is greatly necessary for the progressive disciple. Maharaj Pariksit is a typical disciple because he is perfectly inquisitive. If one is not very inquisitive about self-realization, one need not approach a spiritual master simply to make a show of discipleship. Not only is Maharaj Pariksit inquisitive concerning all he has inquired about, but he is also anxious to know about what he has not been able to inquire. Factually, it is not possible for a man to inquire about everything from the spiritual master. But the bona fide spiritual master is able to enlighten the disciple in every way for the disciple's benefit. This is very important because what is needed is to remove the doubt. Every conditioned soul has doubts lingering in the subtle body from lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of different experiences and different sensory inputs from all of the senses over lifetimes and lifetimes. So therefore there's doubts there that we don't even know about. Therefore he's saying, tell me things, even things that I haven't asked about, just in case I miss something. Text 25. O great sage, you are as good as Brahma, the original living being. Others follow custom only, as followed by previous philosophical speculators. Purport. It may be argued that Shukadeva Goswami is not the only authority of perfect knowledge and transcendence, because there are many other sages and their followers. Contemporary to Vyasadeva, or even prior to him, there were many other great sages, such as Gautama, Kanada, Jaimini, Kapila, and Ashtavakra. And all of them have presented a philosophical path by themselves. Patanjali is also one of them. And all these 6 great rishis have their own way of thinking, exactly like the modern philosophers and mental speculators. The difference between the 6 philosophical paths put forward by the renowned sages mentioned above and the path of Shukadeva Goswami, as presented in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, is that all these 6 sages mentioned. What happened? I just lost my... Wait, here it is. Got it. The difference between the 6 philosophical paths put forward... The difference between the 6 philosophical paths put forward by the renowned sages mentioned above and the path of Shukadeva Goswami, as presented in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, is that all the 6 sages mentioned above speak the facts according to their own thinking. But Shukadeva Goswami presents the knowledge which comes down directly from Brahmaji, who is known as Atmabhu, or born of and educated by the Almighty Personality of Godhead. Vedic transcendental knowledge descends directly from the Personality of Godhead. By his mercy, Brahma, the first living being in the universe, was enlightened. And from Brahmaji, Narada was enlightened. And from Narada, Vyasa was enlightened. Shukadeva Goswami received such transcendental knowledge directly from his father, Vyasadeva. Thus, the knowledge being received from the chain of disciplic succession is perfect. One cannot be a perfect spiritual master. One cannot be a spiritual master in perfection unless and until one has received the same by disciplic succession. That is the secret of receiving transcendental knowledge. The 6 great sages mentioned above may be great thinkers, but their knowledge by mental speculation is not perfect. However perfect an empiric philosopher may be in presenting a philosophical thesis, such knowledge is never perfect because it is produced by an imperfect mind. Such great sages also have their disciplic successions, but they are not authorized because such knowledge does not come directly from the independent Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. No one can be independent except Narayana. Therefore, no one's knowledge can be perfect, for everyone's knowledge is dependent on the flickering mind. Mind is material, and thus knowledge presented by material speculators is never transcendental and can never become perfect. Mundane philosophers, being imperfect in themselves, disagree with other philosophers, because a mundane philosopher is not a philosopher at all unless he presents his own theory. Intelligent persons, like Maharaj Pariksit, do not recognize such mental speculators, however great they may be, but hear from authorities like Shukadeva Goswami. I have to read that sentence better. Mundane philosophers, being imperfect in themselves, disagree with other philosophers, because a mundane philosopher is not a philosopher at all unless he presents his own theory. Intelligent persons, like Maharaj Pariksit, do not recognize such mental speculators, however great they may be, but hear from authorities, like Shukadeva Goswami, who is non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the Parampara system, as is specially stressed in the Bhagavad Gita. Text 26. Notice that Prabhupada in his purports to the Srimad-Bhagavatam is constantly referring the reader back to the Bhagavad Gita, because the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are the basis of spiritual philosophy. And all the things that are in the Bhagavatam are actually the verses of the Bhagavad Gita unpacked in more and more detail. And they continue to flourish and produce more detail as one reads. Okay, text 26. O learned Brahmana, because of my drinking the nectar of the message of the infallible personality of Godhead, which is flowing down from the ocean of your speeches, I do not feel any sort of exhaustion due to my fasting. Purport. The disciplic succession from Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, and Shukadeva Goswami is particularly different from others. The disciplic successions from other sages are simply a waste of time, being devoid of Achyutakatha, or the message of the infallible Lord. The mental speculators can present their theories very nicely by reason and arguments, but such reasons and arguments are not infallible, for they are defeated by better mental speculators. Maharaj Pariksit was not interested in dry speculation of the flickering mind, but he was interested in the topics of the Lord because, factually, he felt that by hearing such a nectarian message from the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami, he was not feeling any exhaustion, even though he was fasting because of his imminent death. One can indulge in hearing the mental speculators, but such hearing cannot endure for any length of time. One will be exhausted very soon from hearing such hackneyed ways of thinking, and no one in the world can be satisfied simply by hearing such useless speculations. The message of the Lord, especially from a personality like Shukadeva Goswami, can never be tiring, even though one may be exhausted from other causes. In some editions of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the text of the last line of this verse reads, Anyatra kupitad dvijat, which means that the king might be overwhelmed by the thought of his imminent death by snakebite. The snake is also twice born, and its anger is compared to the cursing Brahmana boy who was without good intelligence. Maharaj Pariksit was not at all afraid of death, for he was fully encouraged by the message of the Lord. One who is fully absorbed in Achyutakatha can never be afraid of anything in this world. Hare Krishna. I'm going to read that again because it's too nice, too much nice. One who is fully absorbed in Achyutakatha can never be afraid of anything in this world. Text 27. Suta Goswami said, thus Shukadeva Goswami, being invited by Maharaj Pariksit to speak on topics of Lord Sri Krishna with the devotees, was very much pleased. Purport. Srimad-Bhagavatam can be legitimately discussed only among the devotees of the Lord. As the Bhagavad Gita was authoritatively discussed between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the Lord and the devotee, respectively. Similarly, Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is the postgraduate study of the Bhagavad Gita, can also be discussed between the scholars and devotees like Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit. Otherwise, the real taste of the nectar cannot be relished. Shukadeva Goswami was pleased with Maharaj Pariksit because he was not at all tired of hearing the topics of the Lord and was more and more anxious to hear them on and on with interest. Foolish interpreters unnecessarily tackle the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam when they have no access to the subject matters. There is no use in non-devotees meddling with the two topmost Vedic literatures, and therefore Shankaracharya did not touch Srimad Bhagavatam for commentation. In his commentation on the Bhagavad Gita, Sripad Shankaracharya accepted Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but later on he commented from the impersonalist view. But being conscious of his position, he did not comment on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was protected by Lord Krishna, Vide, Brahma Vaivarta Purana, and therefore he is known as Brahmarata. And Sriman Pariksit Maharaj was protected by Vishnu, and thus he is known as Vishnurata. As devotees of the Lord, they are always protected by the Lord. It is clear also in this connection that a Vishnurata should hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a Brahmarata and no one else, because others misrepresent the transcendental knowledge and thus spoil one's valuable time. 28. He began to reply to the inquiries of Maharaj Pariksit by saying that the science of the personality of Godhead was spoken first by the Lord himself to Brahma when he was first born. Srimad Bhagavatam is a supplementary Vedic literature, and it is just in pursuance of the Vedas. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of the personality of Godhead. The impersonalist always tries to misinterpret the personal feature of the Lord, not knowing the science of this great knowledge. And Srimad Bhagavatam is in pursuance of the Vedas and scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. To learn this science, one should take shelter of the representative of Sri Shukadev and follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Pariksit without foolishly attempting to interpret, thereby committing a great offense at the feet of the Lord. The dangerous ways of interpretations by the non-devotee class of men have played havoc in understanding the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the careful student should be always alert in this matter if he at all wants to learn the science of Godhead. Hare Krishna. I was talking to a devotee the other day, and he was trying to understand how we can avoid hearing from devotees who may not be properly representing the philosophy when the devotee may not be so qualified to be able to discriminate the subtle details, the intricate details of philosophy. Because this is what the mental speculators do. They take advantage of people's, innocent people, simple persons, inability to follow the deep philosophical thoughts that they're propounding, and in that way they gain followers. But we were talking about it, and it came out in the conversation that even if we can't understand everything, we do have a soul, and that soul is full of faith. And based on Rupa Goswami's instructions to accept, and Sanatana Goswami also gives the same description of surrender, what surrender means. It's a process. It's not just a sentimental show of instantaneously throwing your hands in the air and fully surrendering, and that's it. The process of surrender is over. It's a process, and it will go on forever until the last breath we take. And so the point that came out during the discussion was both Rupa and Sanatana say that the first step of surrender is to accept those things that are favorable and to reject those things that are unfavorable. So how are you going to tell if something's favorable or unfavorable? You can tell by the effect that it has on your heart. Like a person can give you a piece of cake that really looks like the cake of all cakes, and then it's been made with salt instead of sugar, or something like that, and then when you taste it, then you actually find out. So even if you can't understand everything philosophically because of for whatever reason, if you hear from someone or you see something or you come into contact with an event or philosophy or person or whatever, and it affects your faith negatively, if you feel yourself becoming more disturbed and your faith becoming weakened, then you should know this thing should not be, at least for now, it shouldn't be indulged in. Either it's premature for you, or it's something that's off and you shouldn't get involved at all. Therefore it says here, the dangerous ways of interpretations by the non-devotee class of men have played havoc in understanding the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and the careful student should be always alert in this matter if he at all wants to learn the science of Godhead. Text 29. He also prepared himself to reply to all that King Pariksit had inquired from him. I mean, the questions were so profound and so deep and so many. I couldn't even remember the questions, what to speak of answering them, one by one in order perfectly. Who can do that? Maharaj Pariksit was the best in the dynasty of the Pandus, and thus he was able to ask the right questions from the right person. Purport. Maharaj Pariksit asked many questions, some of them very curiously, to know things as they are, but it is not necessary for the master to answer them in the order of the disciples' inquiries, one after the other. But Shukadeva Goswami, experienced teacher that he was, answered all the questions in a systematic way as they were received from the chain of disciplic succession. And he answered all of them without exception. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the second canto, 8th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Questions by King Pariksit. Hare Krishna. Haribol. Okay, now, I made more comments than I usually do in that chapter because I felt the end of that was very important for us to understand. Okay, now, we're going on to chapter 9. And the answer to this, the title of this chapter is called Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. You see, we don't give answers from our own version. We don't give answers that are different than anyone else's has ever been. Or we don't give answers from obscure, authorities that the devotees may not even know our authorities or not. We should go with the standard authorities. Text 1 answers by citing the Lord's version. Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul in Krishna consciousness with the material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer's seeing his own body working. Purport. Maharaj Parikshit's question as to how a living entity began his material life, although he is apart from the material body and mind, is perfectly answered. The spirit soul is distinct from the material conception of his life, but he is absorbed in such a material conception because of being influenced by the external energy of the Lord called Atma Maya. This has already been explained in the first canto in connection with Vyasadeva's realization of the Supreme Lord and his external energy. The external energy is controlled by the Lord, and the living entities are controlled by the external energy, by the will of the Lord. Therefore, although the living entity is purely conscious in his pure state, he is subordinate to the will of the Lord in being influenced by the external energy of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, also, the same thing is confirmed. The Lord is present within the heart of every living entity, and all the living entities' consciousness and forgetfulness are influenced by the Lord. Now the next question, automatically made, will be why the Lord influences the living entity to such consciousness and forgetfulness. The answer is that the Lord clearly wishes that every living entity be in his pure consciousness as a part and parcel of the Lord, and thus be engaged in the loving service of the Lord as he is constitutionally made. But because the living entity is partially independent also, he may not be willing to serve the Lord, but may try to become as independent as the Lord is. All the non-devotee living entities are desirous of becoming equally as powerful as the Lord, although they are not fit to do so. The living entities are illusioned by the will of the Lord because they wanted to become like him. Like a person who thinks of becoming a king without possessing the necessary qualifications. When the living entity desires to become the Lord himself, he is put into a condition of dreaming that he is a king. I'll read that again. Like a person who thinks of becoming a king without possessing the necessary qualification, when the living entity desires to become the Lord himself, he is put into a condition of dreaming that he is a king. Therefore, the first sinful will of the living entity is to become the Lord. And the consequent will of the Lord is that the living entity forget his factual life and thus dream of the land of utopia, where he may become one like the Lord. The child cries to have the moon from the mother, and the mother gives the child a mirror to satisfy the crying and disturbing child with the reflection of the moon. Similarly, the crying child of the Lord is given over to the reflection, the material world, to lord it over as a karmi, and to give up, and to give this up in frustration to become one with the Lord. Both these stages are dreaming illusions only. There is no necessity of tracing out the history of when the living entity desired this. But the fact is that as soon as he desired it, He was put under the control of Atma Maya. Shall I repeat that again? For the benefit of all those in the world who are insisting on discussing this topic ad infinitum, ad nauseum, I might add. There is no necessity of tracing out the history of when the living entity desired this. This is direct statement from Srila Prabhupada in his purport to Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is the ultimate authority for the Krishna consciousness movement. The law book for the next 10,000 years, as Prabhupada himself said, to Rameswar in the back of a car on the way to the LA temple in 1976. But the fact is that as soon as he desired it, the living entity was put under the control of Atma Maya by the direction of the Lord. Therefore, the living entity in this material condition is dreaming falsely that this is mine and this is I. But not only that, he's responsible for it. This is the key to making it tangible spiritual advancement. Giving up the thought or giving up, or pretending that someone else is responsible for our condition in this material world. We're responsible. Each one of us has made the decision to come here. Just like each one of us makes a decision to look like we do and act like we do and be like we are in the world. Every one of us makes that decision. No one does it for us. Within that conditioned state, it's a fact that some people may be more insidious and more influential than others, and therefore some innocent people may get affected negatively. But ultimately, we're all here in the material world because we chose to be. And therefore all those sufferings and all those happinesses, temporary happinesses, are actually created by the living entity himself. And therefore to blame Krishna for it is dishonest. But the fact is that as soon as he desired it, he was put under the control of Atma Maya by the direction of the Lord. Therefore the living entity in his material condition is dreaming falsely that this is mine and this is I. The dream is that the conditioned soul thinks of his material body as I, or falsely thinks that he is the Lord and that everything in connection with that material body is mine. Thus only in dream does the misconception of I and mine persist life after life. This continues life after life, as long as the living entity is not purely conscious of his identity as the subordinate part and parcel of the Lord. In his pure consciousness, however, there is no such misconceived dream. In that pure consciousness state, in that pure conscious state, the living entity does not forget that he is never the Lord, but is eternally the servitor of the Lord in transcendental love. So, ladies and gentlemen, you all have to forgive me because I'm getting jet lagged and I'm starting to become unplugged. When you get jet lag, it's like involuntarily you just become unplugged and there's nothing you can do about it. So before I embarrass all of you by falling asleep right in the middle of a sentence, I'm going to stop the reading now tonight and take some well-deserved rest, I think. Because we didn't sleep last night on the plane and then we were up all day practically. I took a little nap, but it wasn't enough. So thank you so much for being with us again. And please come again and again. Share it with others. We're over 700 followers now. We're extremely anxious and eager for the reading of Prabhupada's books every day like this, like we're doing, to be spread so that other people can taste the deep understanding that comes from regularly reading Srila Prabhupada's books carefully like this and letting him speak for himself. Not just for one verse and a little bit of a purport and then have a class, which is good also. That's his program. But this is also important and also necessary. We're getting some questions. So we'll take reflections or questions or anything that was in the reading that stuck out in your mind. I mean, I made a lot more comments this time than I usually do, or things that stuck out in my mind, because they were so relevant to all of us. So, no questions. They're being compassionate to me. They can see, they're watching me. They watch me every night, and they can see that I'm kind of struggling a little bit to keep it together. Radharaman has a point or a question or whatever. Revelation.
Question.
He has a question.
It makes a point in one of the purports at the end of the last chapter that saying words to the effect that a serious disciple has questions to ask the spiritual master.
Oh, this is a good question. This came to my mind also while I was reading, but I didn't comment on it. Go ahead.
And I just wondered whether you could comment more.
He wants me to comment on the fact that Prabhupada is stating that if a person's serious, then he will inquire from his spiritual master. And the reason this is coming up in his mind is because Srila Prabhupada himself said that he only asked one question of his spiritual master. Then that was, what can I do for you? How can I serve you? But Prabhupada was obviously not an ordinary person. And everything that he told, the spiritual master said, it inspired him and answered his questions. So it's not an absolute necessity that you inquire, but it's absolutely necessary that you be inquisitive. You see the difference? Because if you're inquisitive and you hear from the spiritual master, then your answers the questions to your answers will be revealed to you. If you're not inquisitive, then that affects the quality of your ability to receive it. Because why is a person not inquisitive? There's something going on inside him. There's some resistance, or there's some doubt, or there's something there that's preventing the knowledge to go through.
It reminds me of the definition you gave the other night of honesty.
Yes.
So what is honesty? And you answer the question by saying it's when someone actually hears the truth and is able to take it on board.
Yes. Accept it. Recognize it as the truth and accept it. Yes, that's right. So Prabhupada recognized everything that Bhaktisiddhanta said as the truth, fully took it, and therefore he was able to do the mission that his spiritual master wanted him to do. So he was fully inquisitive all the time. All right, I thank you so much, and give me a little time to, recuperate from that long haul. And also, I just went through this ordeal with my elbow, and I wasn't moving very much and doing very much, for good reasons, having to take healing rest and everything. And it's still there, by the way. It's not healed, but it's much, much better. And I trust the doctor completely. He was very intelligent. He even said I didn't really need to have physiotherapy. I just need to use it in a way, but I have to be very careful until it's actually fully healed. And that will take at least another month, maybe 2 months. Yeah. I'll show it to you later on. All right, thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Pariksit Maharaj ki jai. Shukadev Goswami ki jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Now you have to, when I go Gaur Premanandi, then you turn it off. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.